All right, so let's say we have our logos, they're a masterpiece, we're all done. We have our logo sheet that is showing different variations of a few of our picks of logos that we liked and developed. And we also have the final logo. Let's close some of these little boxes here. The final logo laid out along with all the stuff that's in there. So, if we have all these things, as I'm, never mind technical difficulties here, what we need to do is actually go in and save out our sheets. So how I want to do that is two things. Number one, I want to make sure that whatever document, I might have to do a save as first, but anything that I actually had that was on the outside, just laying out, like sometimes I'll have things floating out here. I want to make sure that I've cleared them out, so I only have this stuff here. Okay? So once I'm sure I have that and it's all cleared out, and I mean, I don't have to, but it just makes life a lot easier. So just for a clean document, there's a few things. So I've saved this file as an Illustrator file, save as, and we'll call it logo sheet week 1 with whatever folder that we're working in. Let's move it to the folder here. So let's just say this is going to be logo sheet week 1. This is my Illustrator, excuse me, my Illustrator file. I'm going to leave this pretty much everything is the default. Illustrator 2020. If you were on an older version, that's fine. It will probably be, if you've checked out a machine, it'll be Illustrator CC Legacy, which is Creative Cloud. Something of that nature, that's okay. So any one of those should be fine. But if you're having issues, yeah, you can just downgrade it to CC. It will, if you're using special stuff, get rid of it. So have another version of the file, but you should only have to change this if you're using an old version of Illustrator. And even with that, you should be fine. Just save it as is. So now this guy is saved, but that's just my Illustrator file. So what I want to do for Turnitin is I would send this, but we have to do something different with this one before we do that. So let's do first the images. So I'm going to go File, and instead of doing a save as or save a copy, which is not going to give me the option of saving this out as an image, I'm going to go and say export, and we have a few different options depending on which version of Illustrator you're using. So if I say export as, we see it gives me some different versions. Let me grab this, copy, and I would just save it as that as week 1 and just say export. And I cranked up, it's RGB like we should have because we're going eventually into After Effects. RGB, high quality, 72 pixels an inch per inch. So everything's pretty much standard. Just make sure this is RGB and that this is cranked up to maximum. Okay, so once that is done, then what I can do is I can go and see what that looks like. And if I look at it, let's pull it up. And there it is, just like that. Now you might notice it looks a little low res. And what we can do to fix this is we can temporarily boost the size up because these are all vectors. We want them nice and clean. So even though I'm not planning on printing this, I want them to be clear so that when we share it with the class, the resolution isn't falling apart. So let's do that again. And we're just going to change it a little bit. File. Where are you? Export. Export as. Um, And this time I'm going to go and just save this one as number 2 so we can see what the difference is as a JPEG. And instead, let's boost it up. So even though we're not going to print, we still want a nice clean image. So I'm going to boost it up to, let's try 300 ppi. And so now when I go in, let's look at the difference. Now the first thing, I'm using this program here, which is called XNView, and it's a freebie, you don't have to get it. But I love it because through the years I've used this, and it's just a really nice way to view all kinds of images and convert them and do stuff like that. And the first one, you'll notice the resolution is much smaller, and this one, wow, that's much bigger. So if we look at the first one, and now let's go back, here's the new one. So that's the new 300. And it's still pretty small, 2.26 megabytes. So for us, excuse me, for these images, we'll do 300. Oops, and it looks like I didn't have something selected, but that's okay. So all that is set and that looks good. Double check it to make sure things are not acting weird. I just have to check and make sure. Now, when it comes to some of this stuff, if you're having problems, and you can change your fonts that you're using just for stuff like this. Um, the thing about fonts is you don't want to pick something that is just so uh, crazy that people can't read it, right? Now, one problem is if you turn this file into me right now, what'll happen is a lot of the fonts you might be using, like I'm using this font, right? Which if I were to look at that and see what the font is, this particular font is actually, let me just hit escape. I double clicked because since these are grouped, I double clicked and it got me inside of the group so that I can go into here and you can see, oh, I'm using baby blocks. And if I say, wait, I don't want to be in here, I just hit escape a few times and then you'll get out of that group. But you might use a font that I may not have or somebody else may not have, and then all this is going to just go wrong when you send it to somebody. So if you were to send in the Illustrator file, or when you send in the Illustrator file, you'd want to do something. So I'm going to do a save as. And logo week 1, I'm just going to I just put a little addendum to this and call it converted outlines. And what I want to do with this, I'll just say, okay, I haven't converted outlines, but what I want to do is anytime you have text, right now it's still editable as text. Now I don't want to have only the version I'm about to make. That's why you have 2. I have one that I can go in and say, oh, I want to edit this text. But if I'm going and I want to send it to somebody and make sure they can just see it and they don't have the font, I can right click on the text and say create outlines. And what I did was I literally converted that text into an actual graphic. So you see they have points that I can now go in and edit and even make my own, spin on what these fonts look like. If I wanted to add something like, oh yeah, I want you to have like little serifs here or something like that. So when I convert text like these are to a graphic, they are no longer editable, right? So if I select these, right click, create outlines, they are no longer editable as text. They are now a graphic, as if I drew them myself. And saving a version out like that helps. Now, of course, the funny part with this is that if I do this, like, oh, let me just select this, right click, let's go in. I'd have to go into whichever one's like, oh, here's one here. Let's grab you. Right click. Shift Control O will actually do it, but Shift Control O, and now they're all outlines. So when I do this, We don't need the background. Shift Control O, and they're all outlined. So anything that I have, these are actually outlined, so I don't have to do anything with them. These are all outlined, so I don't have to do anything with them. Oops, and there's one that's still, so Shift Control O. It still has the warp on it, but it's now outlines. So now if I hit Control Y, you see that all of these are actually outlined graphics. Hit Control Y again. And I'll save this one. This one, remember, I saved as the outline version. So I have both. I have the editable one, and then I have the graphic one. And then the editable one, this one, if you're having problems or doing things, you can send this one. But this one is probably better because then you send me this version, but keep the editable one, okay? Because we're going to do some stuff with that. But so now I have two versions. I've got my editable text one and I've got my graphic one, where these are now individual image like shapes and pieces that I can deal with. And we're going to look next week at what the differences are between those two and what are the benefits and drawbacks of both. So they both have really cool things we can do. As editable text, there's tools inside of After Effects that we can just easily animate text by letter, by word, by sentence really quickly. As objects, I can use these as mask. I can use them as shapes, and I can do other things with them. So they both have their benefits, and we'll go over those later. But for right now, I have two versions. I've got my editable one, and I've got my graphic one. And then I can use either one, but I want to keep that editable one so I don't have to redo my text and stuff. But this one's just really nice, so I have both. And then all I'd have to do is as well create this version here, which I think my machine is just acting a little wonky. I don't know why that's actually doing that. That's kind of weird. I think it's little too many programs open, so my text has dropped out for some reason. So, because even when I bring to front, yeah, it's acting weird. And it was doing that earlier, so I just have to check a little something. But then I would have that with my text. Yeah, it's fading in and out. So never mind that. I think it's a driver issue. I'll take care of that. But then I could do this, and then I would have my turn in with my reasoning that has text that you just can't see right now. And then I'd be able to do that. Okay. So let me know if you have any questions. Once again, we just do the export as, go right there, and then make sure we've cleared out the background for what we're doing, and then you'll have no problem.